Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Think on These Things podcast. We are so glad that you are listening in. And I am super excited about this week's episode because we have a very special guest, Dr. Christian Johnson. And just a little bit about him. He has a bachelor's in psychology from East Tennessee State University. It's going to take me a long time, y'all, to read all these accomplishments off. So y'all just sit back and relax. He's got a master's in counseling from Milligan College. He's got a education specialist in educational leadership from Lincoln Memorial University. And he has a PhD in educational leadership from the University of the Cumberland. He's also a licensed professional counselor and a mental health service provider. And he's also a licensed parent-child interaction therapist and trainer, a licensed school counselor, and a licensed school administrator. Wow, that's amazing. Tell us.
Yeah, so I think that I just started chopping away at this educational tree and never got tired of swinging. And so I think finally the tree is chopped down. I think I'm done with school.
For now. When do you sleep? That's what we all want to know.
You know, when you find out, let me know. I'm still trying to figure that out myself.
You just started. You just started since you finished your doctorate, correct?
Just now, yes. It's but I'm getting used to it a little bit at a time.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're really excited to have you on the podcast today because I thought it was really important that we talk about something that I personally get questions on all the time. And it's about parenting and about parenting children in the modern world. Parents have so many questions, and I think they are sincere in their desire that they want to help guide their kids through some of these issues that teenagers, children, young adults are facing today. Things that I'm 36, and these things weren't even an issue when I was young. And so it's a whole new world.
Yeah, the world is evolving and shaping so quickly. And I think that is a challenge in just about any facet of life that you're looking at. By the time that you catch up on one thing, there are already 3 or 4 steps that have transpired since then. So I don't think parenting is any different. And so I think especially for a lot of the parents that we talk to and work with, they're trying to figure out how to incorporate all these biblical principles and the things that they've learned throughout their life into this world that has adapted and shaped so quickly. And I think that's tricky, but it's definitely doable when you've got the right tools in your hands.
That's good. So I know that you are currently employed as a school counselor, correct?
I am, yes. I'm school counselor at Rogersville Middle School. I get to work with about 500 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So it's never the same thing. It's always something brand new, and it keeps me on my toes, but I love it. It's a blast.
Wow. So you seeing so many kids all during the school year, what's some of the things that you're seeing commonly in your office as a school counselor? Some of the issues kids are dealing with?
Sure. So I think this is maybe a two-part answer I'm going to try to give you.
Okay.
A lot of the things that I see come into my office, I feel like present as maybe one thing, but there are so many underlying symptoms or issues that attribute to that. So some of the things that I see a lot are students really struggling with how to socialize with their peers in appropriate ways. And so how quickly something really small can escalate into something really big. Now, I think that probably is an age thing. They're just now learning. They're transitioning out of being a little kid, and they're thinking that they're an adult, and they're thinking that they can take on these big things, but their brain just isn't there yet. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And so I think that fuels a lot of drama and a lot of friendship issues, and they're getting their first little boyfriend or girlfriend, and so they don't know how to navigate those waters yet. And so what comes to my office the most, I see a ton of uncertainty. I see a ton of confusion. I see a ton of, I don't know what to do next. And I think that manifests as anxiety. I think that manifests as depression. I think that manifests as stress, that manifests in relationship issues, either with peers or with teachers or with parents, or a lot of my kids, grandparents, because their parents aren't in the picture as much. I even had a kid the other day. I was dealing with a great grandparent. And so the structure and stability in their life is not where we would want it to be if we had our choice. And so there's so much uncertainty, so much sandy ground, so to speak. We hear those terms a lot about where you're building your house. Their house is built on sand. And so they're having to and survive. And I think because of that, there are so many issues that come into their life that they're not sure that's where that comes from. But I'm seeing that a lot of what they're struggling with.
Okay. So how do you, as a school counselor, how are you walking through that with them?
Very slowly. So one of the things that I struggled with the most when I first became a counselor, I was very privileged, very, very lucky to grow up in the family that I grew up in, and did not realize it. I could almost take you to the seat I was sitting in my marriage and family class in college, where people around me started talking about the lives that they lived. And I was shocked at the pain and the trauma and the dysfunction that these people had grown up in, because from my grandparents on both sides down to grandchildren, we've never had to deal with, just recently had to deal with some major illness, some cancer in the family. Other than that, everything's been really, really good. Not a lot of divorce, if any divorce. Everybody's in church, everybody's doing well. And so when I first became a counselor, my expectations for what I felt like these kids should be striving for were really, really high, because that's what I had observed my whole life. And so I was all excited, brand new counselor, and I thought, we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to fix this behavior in 2 months, and these parents are going to be great, and they're going to work with me. We're going to figure this out really fast. Boy, was that not the case. So real quickly, I had to adjust what was successful in my eyes and try to really focus in on what was going to be success to them. Because it was going to be what I felt was successful and what they felt was successful. Our feelings were going to be the same, but the levels were just going to be different. So when I see kids come into my office, the first thing I try to do is I just sit back. I try to just take a lot of stuff in, take as much information as I can take in, and then ask questions. I'm still learning this, not to just assume what's in the kid's head or assume what's going on at home, because I've been pleasantly surprised, and I've been surprised in a negative way too, as to the things that these kids have going on. So they come in, I listen, I absorb. The very first thing I do, my goal beyond counseling, beyond a school personnel, I'm trying to build rapport. I'm trying to show this kid, this is a place, this is a room, this is a seat you can sit in, and you don't have to worry about the same kinds of things that you have to worry about outside of here. And if I can make that space safe for them, if I can get some of those fight or flight senses, some of that anxiety that they feel, to settle down, those walls to kind of, settle down a little bit, to let that Coke not be so shook up and ready to explode at all times. It's amazing to see how their true personalities come out and how much more open they can be. So that's my goal. And that's more than just a one time coming to my office. We may not hit anything that they're really struggling with for 2 or 3 days. I'm also privileged. I get to see them every day. I know a lot of people don't have that luxury in counseling situations. I really work on rapport building. I let them ask me questions. I try to make it really informal, really safe, really comfortable. And then when I see that little bit of opening, when I feel that has kind of developed and some trust has been developed, that's when that's when I start digging really, really slowly. Because these kids have experienced a lot of stuff, even if it wasn't big, maybe as to me as an adult, it's big to them as a 12 and 13 and 14-year-old. So that's kind of my approach. And the reason why I did that is because I think that's what would have been successful for me as a kid that age.
Yeah.
That's what I try. I've seen a lot of success with it just because they come back.
That's right. That's good. Well, and I know we don't have just parents watching this, but we also have a lot of parents or pastors, ministers, youth workers, mentors. And I think that that's great, solid advice, because I think sometimes just relating as a ministry leader, sometimes our tendency is when we see kids that are troubled or kids having a tough time, our thoughts are, okay, we got to get a hold of this right now. And a lot of times we might think, okay, one good come to Jesus meeting is going to take care of this. But in your experience, you're saying that's not really what kids need in that moment. Not to minimize prayer, not to minimize spirituality, but it's more than just having a good hour-long prayer meeting. Not that God can't fix it, but what you're saying is these kids need some relationship tools. They need some skills. They need some rapport building. They need to have an adult that's going to listen to them and take interest in what they're expressing. Does that sum it up?
100%. Okay. I think what I see from our teachers, what I've seen from other adults that I've worked with, what I've been guilty of at times is we forget what it's like to be 12. We forget what it's like to be 13. I would consider myself young, but I've been out of that for a long time. I tell my kids at school, I was older than you are when you were born. Like however old you are right now, I was older than that when you were born, which now. But I think we're thinking about things from an adult mindset so much that the first thing that comes to mind is I got to fix it or I've got to coach it. Yeah. And
that's good.
Kids are not robots. They're not remote control cars that we can't hit a couple of buttons on a joystick and tell them what to do or let them kind of give them something to do and expect them to follow it. So I think that I've seen them go straight into coaching, straight into fixing it. And what I'm seeing from kids at school is not only are they not really wanting to follow that, but they're resistant to it. They're tired of people telling them what to do. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And here's why I say that is because they want to know why. They want to know. I think it can maybe goes a little bit against what we've learned, maybe growing up in church, that obedience is better than sacrifice. But they want to know it for themselves. They want to know why that they're doing what they're doing, how it's going to benefit them, how it's going to benefit other people. And I understand that's not always what we can give them, either because they won't understand it or we don't have time to explain it to them. But in moments when we can, taking the information, try to avoid going straight into coach mode, see where their headspace is at. And then if you do have to go into coach mode or do have to go to instruction mode, I feel like it gives you a much better path to follow.
Yeah, that's right. I feel like I hear from kids a lot. And you could tell me if this has been a similar experience for you. I feel like I hear from kids, and I don't see as many kids as you do, but they feel like that adults spend a lot of time invalidating how they feel. And they're just like, well, what I say doesn't matter. Nobody cares what I'm thinking. Or if I tell my parents or tell someone, they're just like, well, you know what? When I was a kid, I went through the same thing. And you know what? I just had to get over it. And kids are just like, that doesn't make me feel any better. Like they just invalidate everything I say.
Yes, 100%. One of many things that may be going in the wrong direction in our culture and our society, one thing that I do think is a positive is the light that has been shown upon mental health, its existence, its importance. And a lot of parents might say, just tough it up. I got through it. You did too. But when I hear anybody say that, the first thing that comes to my mind is, did you really get through it?
That's right.
It doesn't seem like you did. It seems like maybe you have placed it so far and repressed it so far in the back of your mind that you want to believe that you got over it and got through it. But I heard a story one time about a real estate company, and they were developing land on this piece of property that a different business had buried all this toxic waste, this toxic dump site. And they decided, instead of spending the money that it was going to take to eradicate that piece of land of all these terrible things, they would just cover it up, build on top of it, and pretend like it never happened. And it was successful for a while until some of the people moved in and started having children and started, establishing their lives. And all of a sudden, these health issues started coming up. Children born with different deformities, different cancers started to their eyes, and they went back and found the cause of that was realized, undealt with issues that were just simply covered up. And so how many things in those people's lives, when they think that they've dealt with it, really have just been pushed back or buried? And how many times is that affecting so many areas of their life?
Yes, that's right.
So that really sparked something in me. And I push my kids all the time, and I say, listen, I tell them that story. I'll say, I know there's some things in your life that I can't relate with. I've not dealt with those things. I've not had to go through those things. But don't make the same mistake that this company did. Don't think that, I can just put it in the on, pretend that it doesn't affect me, pretend that it doesn't exist, pretend that it's not a big deal, and just bury it and hide it. Because if you do now, it might work for a little bit, but eventually those things will come back up. And so, yes, I agree 100%. The invalidation, and I think that's a big thing maybe with where we can hit parents starting off with this video is, if you want to be a great parent, start with, what are the things about me? Start with some self-reflection. Start with some, and that's tough. That is really, really hard, because you've spent probably 20, 30, 40 years convincing yourself that, well, everything's fine, everything's good. And I'm not saying you have to go uncover and unearth every single thing that you've ever gone through and again, but recognize how some of those things are maybe impacting you. If you want to be a better parent, reflect on some of the things that have you worked on it, or did you just bury it?
That's right.
And I think that's a lot of invalidation. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, because I heard a statistic recently that a parent that is depressed or anxious, their child is 7 times more likely to be depressed and anxious as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll try not to nerd out on you right here and go all psychology.
Let's hear it. I'm excited.
But one of my favorite studies of all time, Albert Bandura, famous psychologist, did an experiment called the Bobo doll experiment. And so this experiment separated adults and children, and the children were placed in an observation room where they watched or observed this adult interact with this blow-up doll. One of those dolls, it's almost like a punching bag where it's got sand in the bottom, and you tip it over and it comes right back up. And so what this study showed was children that observed parents or adults acting in aggressive manners or violent manners towards this doll, when they were given the opportunity, the kids were given the opportunity to interact with this doll, they exhibited very similar, if not exact, behaviors as what they saw. Whereas kids that saw very calm, very compassionate, very respectful behaviors, remember, this is what they see because they're young, they don't have the socialization skills yet that we might have as an adult. The kids that saw good behaviors exhibited good behaviors. So it doesn't surprise me at all that even in situations where it's anxiety and depression, and it may not be physical acts, that kids start to take on those characteristics and personalize them, because the people who are most likely responsible for their development up to that point, who are they exposed to the most? They're exposed to their parents.
Yeah.
From the time that you're 0 to 5, and unless you have a really supporting big family like me, probably 90% of your time is going to be spent with one parent, both parents, somebody like that. So not only are one of these days, I don't know when I'll get to it, I'd love to write a book about all the ways that psychology and the Bible, science and the secular world wants us to believe that they're diabolically opposed, that they don't agree with each other. Man, and I'll try to stay calm. I'm really passionate about this topic. They agree.
Yeah.
I mean, there is so many things that they agree on. I'll have some stuff of a couple of verses here in a little bit if it fits in. But so many times in the Bible, what people observed is what they took on. When the children of Israel went and they started hanging around, people that were serving these false gods, they shifted into that behavior. Yeah, because
that's right.
God designed us to be social. And interestingly enough, the study that we just talked about, his theory is social learning theory. It's how does the behaviors that you exhibit, how are they impacted by the environment that's around you? One quick Bible story, because this is one of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
So the story of Jacob and Laban. Jacob's about to leave, wants to start his own full family, take some animals. And so Laban says, sure, I'll let you take all the speckled and spotted sheep that you want. But Jacob had done a really good job with keeping his flock pure, quiet. And so what Jacob understood about what you're around has an impact as far as what you then demonstrate. So what Jacob did was every day he took these sheep to the creek, then he'd water every day. It's what they look at. They can see theirself in the reflection of this water. So what he decided to do was he would take branches and reeds and he would strip bark in a way that and place them in the creek so that when the sheep went to look in this creek every day and they saw in their reflection, part of their reflection was in the speckled and spotted reeds and branches that he put in this creek. And so what we find out later from that story is the offspring of some of those sheep, because they saw this every day when they went to this spring, was that their offspring started to become speckled and spotted. They produced what they saw every single day. And so biologically, that makes sense. Spiritually, it makes sense. Psychologically, it makes what you are exposed to every single day, what you expose your kids to every single day, no matter how big or small you might think it is, has a tremendous impact on who that child is going to become now, who they'll become as a second grader, who they're going to become as a seventh grade basketball player, who they're going to be as a senior in high school applying for scholarships, who they're going to be as a husband or wife one day, who they're going to be as a Sunday school teacher. It is a trickle-down effect. So don't ever underestimate the power of what you're showing your kids one way or the other.
That's good. That's really good. I think we have a lot of parents that are asking questions like they have, a teenager, a young adolescent, and maybe they're seeing their child is starting to hang out with the wrong crowd, or maybe getting too immersed in technology, maybe talking to people they shouldn't be talking to, maybe becoming disengaged spiritually. And that's a real concern to parents. So what would your advice be for those parents who start seeing a child that's maybe going off the rails a little bit? Maybe they were a little lax as a parent. How can they come back from that? How can they put some boundaries up for their child and start getting their child around good things without it being an all-out war?
Sure. So I think the very first thing, and once again, this is the difficult part, because sometimes the self-reflection piece can shine light upon maybe some things that we're not doing the best job at. I think the first thing is self-reflecting. And maybe we can split this up into a couple of different things, because I know you mentioned kids that are really heavily involved in electronics or their phone or whatever else. So the first thing I think is, what are they seeing from you, Mom? What are they seeing from you, Dad?
Good.
When they come home from school, are you greeting them and asking them about their day, or are they seeing, we'll step on some toes here, are they seeing you over there playing Candy Crush?
Yeah.
Are they seeing you, trying to look at everybody else's day instead of being concerned about them? And so once again, the speckled and spotted sheep, the anxiety and depression 7 times greater. are they learning that from you? Are they learning that, hey, this is just how I interact? This is the relationship that I'm going to have? Depending on the age of the kid, especially when you're getting into those, 2, 3, 4, those are where a lot of these habits, these behavioral habits are born. Are they seeing that from you? They may not be, right? Maybe that's great, but I think that's the first thing we look at is, what are you showing them? Are you interested in what they're doing? Maybe their interests don't align at all to yours. When I was younger, I was and am still a very, very big sports fan. It's been a huge part of my life. I played basketball growing up. My mom is not so much a sports fan. She'll tolerate it, but I remember, and I didn't know this till later. I'll try not to get emotional talking about this because my mom is really awesome, and I'm realizing this more now. She would get up before I would go to school, and she would watch the 30-minute version of the sports highlights, so that while I was getting ready, she would have something to talk to me about. She didn't. She could care less. She could care less about Kobe Bryant scoring 30 the night before, but she knew that if she wanted to make an impact on me, she had to at least be able to discuss things that interest me. Wow. So are you talking to your kids about things that they're interested in? You may not care. And it's difficult to have conversations about topics that you either don't know a lot or don't care about much. Make that effort. And so somebody's going to watch this and they're going to say, well, I don't know anything about it. How am I going to talk to them about it? Ask questions. Yeah. I promise you, if you have a kid that loves to draw, and I'm a terrible artist. So if my kid ever becomes an artist, they're not going to get any help from me. You don't know a thing about drawing. A thing that's real big for our kids right now at school is they're watching these YouTube videos on how to draw certain things. Ask them. They're going to love to tell you about it because they're excited about it. When people ask me about things about psychology or things about sports, I have to be real conscious not to talk their ear off because I love it. I love to talk about things that I love. So ask questions. I promise you there's probably only one thing that would make them any more excited than talking about the things that they want to talk about. And it's the praise that you give them when they're doing those things.
That's right.
Talk to them, ask them questions. They're going to fill you in and then you'll learn more. You may even find something that you're interested in about that. You may not like art in general at first, but you may learn something new and think, wow, that's really cool. You may find some talents that your kids never had. I've heard many times when I've worked with parents in the past, even young kids, we'll start working on interactions and ways to incorporate yourself in kids' lives more and be intentionally concerned. I wrote this down before we started this. Parent on purpose. Good. Everything you do don't be reactive. Don't wait for something to happen and then try to come up with, how am I going to do that? I think that's a big reason why people get overwhelmed as parents is they're not planning on what they're going to do. My mom set me up every morning. I would sit down and eat a bowl of cereal. Hey, did you see she would ask me, hey, did you see where the Lakers played the Nets last night? And Kobe had 20. I was like, no, did they really? Right. And so she set me up. She already had made a plan. This is the way I'm going to communicate with my son, who I really don't have a whole lot in common with on the sports side of things, but I'm going to be intentional with this. I'm going to parent on purpose. So be intentional with finding these things about your kid. Good. I don't care if they're 20, right? Let's say you're watching this and you realize, man, I could have done some things a lot different with my kid growing up. It's not too late. These behavioral principles, I'm a firm believer that God established our brain and our body to behaviorally respond to things regardless of what our age is. It may be easier sometimes at some levels than others. If you got a 25-year-old that you don't connect with much, apply these same things. Ask them about their work. Ask them, and not like, hey, how's your work going? Where they can answer, yes or no. Try to plan some open-ended questions. Tell me something that you're doing. Tell me a project you're working on right now. Tell me, what were your aspirations in this job? That's for older kids. maybe that are in adulthood. If they're in middle school, what's your science? What are you learning about in science? I promise you it's more than a one-word answer. It's crazy what these kids are about in science. Be intentional, plan some questions out. Even if you have to sit down 20 minutes before you pick them up in the car rider line, write down 3 questions.
That's right.
That you want to. Your conversation is intentional, and they don't get in and are easily bored and go straight to their phone.
That's really good. That's good advice for parents. That's good advice for ministry workers. And honestly, if you're a pastor watching, that's just great advice for working with your people. People want you to be interested in their lives. So many times, I'm not going to go off on this rabbit trail. We have a lot to talk with you about. But so many times, people in ministry think that everybody should be interested in their agenda and only what they're doing, and everybody kind of flock around them. But really, the point is that we as leaders, as parents, as youth workers, we need to be interested in our kids. We need to be interested in the people that we're leading, the people we're mentoring. We need to show interest in their lives and get interested in the things that they're interested in. And then I know as adults, a lot of times that's a reciprocal thing. And then with kids, you build that rapport, and you'll find that they'll open up to you about the things that they're struggling with when they know you're genuinely interested in what's going on in their lives.
That's it. It's an investment. I'm going to give a little bit of me to show that I'm concerned. I care. Our pastor says all the time, people don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care. And if you can spend a little bit of yourself towards somebody else, you will get that back. And it's just how God's math works. You will get that back. They will get that back. And you'll both have more than you had initially. It's an investment that will continue to grow if you're intentional and you do stuff on purpose.
That's good. Well, I know that one of your certifications was and you're a trainer in this too, as in parent-child interaction therapy. So talk about some of the principles that you teach parents. What do you guys teach parents through that therapy?
Yeah, so I won't go too deep in it. I'll just briefly explain what it is. And I also say these principles, even though this therapy model is for kids in this age range, the principles work all the way through. When I was learning about this, our trainer said I was the only guy in this training with about 20 females. And he said, women that are in this class or women who have taken this class before, said, I always tell them, go home and use these skills on your husband because you'll get way more done than you ever have thought before.
That's amazing.
So, parent-child interaction therapy, real briefly, is a 2-phase, play-based behavioral therapy model. And so phase 1, we call child-directed interaction. What this basically is we're teaching parents how to implement positive skills and try to reduce skills that we call don't skills. So what we're pushing them to do is, in the initial phases of this, we're trying to get them to avoid giving commands, asking a lot of questions, and especially trying to keep them from making critical statements.
Good.
And what we're wanting them to do is be really specific with the way that they're praising the kid, track what the kid is saying and reflect it back, and then describe the behaviors that they're seeing from this child. So an example of this, a kid might be playing with some blocks. And what I'm wanting the parent to do is I want them to be intentional, once again, intentionally and on purpose, look for something to praise. I think that is a big issue that I've seen with parents and children that don't have great relationships is I see them out and about, or I see them interact at school, and the kid will do something and the parent's really quick to jump on the things that they see that are wrong or that they don't approve of.
Yeah.
And they very rarely hear things that they are doing well, because I've had teachers tell me this, I've had parents tell me this. Well, I'm not gonna give them a praise or give them reward for something that I expect them to do. To which I reply, if it works, why not?
That's right.
I promise. It takes so much less effort and so much less energy to give compliments than to enforce discipline.
Yeah.
So much. So when I'm working with parents, that's the first thing we do. And I'm in a completely different room. It's also interesting to see how many parents are so uncomfortable playing with their kids.
Yeah.
Which, back to what I talked about earlier, what are they seeing from you, Mom? What are they seeing from you? Because I've got phone blocks, I've got cars, and I've got a train set. And parents go in there and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I mean, and part of it's natural. Like I said, it's been a long time since we've been kids. We haven't been asked to be imaginative in play in a long, long time. So they're uncomfortable with it.
Sure.
But they don't have, you can tell they just don't have a lot of practice with it. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's they've went to play with their kids before and they've been uncomfortable. So they've retreated, right?
Absolutely.
That's something they recognize within themselves. So we do that for probably 6 weeks. They come once a week, 6 weeks. Then, and I hear some people saying, well, what about the discipline? Right? That's one of the first things.
Sure.
That's one of the first things that come in and want to know is what kind of discipline. I've tried spanking my kids, I've tried timeout, I've tried all this different stuff, and nothing works.
Yeah.
So what parent-child interaction therapy does, and it doesn't have to be this, but it's a really strict, really consistent, really intentional timeout sequence, so to speak. But the intentionality and the structure of it is what makes it so beautiful, because you can implement this stuff whenever. So without going into a whole lot of detail about it, I'll just say what we teach parents on the front end and what I try to do. I think this is what I opened up with: build that positive rapport. You got to you give yourself some cushion, because when we are starting to implement some of those disciplinary things and the things that aren't fun for the kid, you're not going to get as much backlash, and it's not going to be as difficult if you have cushioned that with this positive relationship that you've built up. So that's the basics behind parent-child interaction therapy. Those principles are good throughout. I mean, it's amazing to see. I'm not that they'll ever see any. I use these with my coworkers.
Sure.
I want them to have a good relationship to me. And so when I see them do something well, I'm really specific with the way I praise them. Hey, I really like how you interacted with this kid in this situation. It would have been really hard to snap at them. I know you've been working on that. And I just wanted you to know that I noticed and paid attention to it. I mean, that's going to make anybody feel good. Me at 29, if I don't care if it's a kid from my Sunday school class that comes up and says, hey, thanks for, bringing us some candy today. That makes me feel good. When you're and acknowledged and affirmed, that feels good to anybody. So those are just some really basic principles. It is one of the few things that I would say, as far as in a therapy setting, that are magic. A lot of other things in therapy take work. They work. The tools work, but you have to put in a lot of effort and stuff with it. And the parents do, but some really basic concepts, because they're doing them intentionally, because they're doing them consistently, those principles working together are magic. It's really incredible to see changes. I have had kids in a span of 3 months. Now, this is a model usually designed for 2 to 7 year olds because it's play-based. I have had kids come in who are yelling at their mom and dad, hitting them in the face, pulling their hair, throwing stuff on the ground, come in that room and flip chairs over. I've had to go in and literally take the table out because they're flipping the table. And in 3 months of this parent committing and saying, I'm going to spend time with my kid and not be distracted by other things, 5 minutes every day, because that's what we ask. I'm going to go once a week and learn some of these really basic skills where I'm going to be specific in the way that I praise them. I'm going to let them know that I'm paying attention in the way that I'm describing the behaviors that I'm seeing. I'm going to reflect back the things that they're saying so that they know I'm paying attention. And I'm not going to be critical. I'm not going to come in and try to fix it. I'm not going to come in and ask a bunch of questions and make them think that I'm not paying attention. And then when I build that relationship, I'm going to establish some consistent barriers, some consistent fences in their life to protect them. And they know that that's why, because I've just built all this good relationship up with them. I've seen kids in 3 months 3 to 4 months go from crazy flipping chairs, hitting, screaming, cussing, yelling, to being to being pleasantly compliant. Hey, Mom, yeah, sure, I'll hand you the block. Whereas it was a nightmare before. So to me, that just shows the power of consistency. It shows the power of praise. It shows the power of how those things can make discipline so much more effective. Because don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who are going to tell you, oh, it's just this real nice, fluffy, be nice to your kids and they'll be all right. The kids need discipline. They don't understand. They don't understand everything there is to learn in life. But I think I'm also a believer in discipline doesn't have to be harsh and punitive and aggressive. I've seen kids go from one spectrum to the other just because the parent was consistent.
Yeah, that's right. And that's amazing. So do you think that those same principles apply, like for instance, because I hear this a lot, like a really angry adolescent that, the parent is struggling, breaking through, that maybe they should start by spending more time with them, giving them some specific praise, like building that rapport. And the teenager may or may not respond kind of because of the stage that they're in, but maybe on the inside, there's a security that comes from that. Because I feel like what you can tell us, but I really feel like sometimes what happens is when there's a issue with the adolescent, maybe they are on their phone too much. Maybe they've snuck out and maybe met somebody from an online chat room. Maybe they've had a suicide attempt. Parents, these are kind of common things that I've heard. Parents tend to overreact. But then as soon as everything is over, the immediate crisis is over, then everything kind of goes back to normal. There's no consistency there as far as how much time they're spending with them, building that relationship with them. But maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of my favorite concepts in the Bible, I think it was in Proverbs when Solomon said it, in all you're getting, in all your accumulation in life, the one thing he mentioned specifically is get understanding, get a background. You don't have to be an expert at it. There's a lot of things that I've studied for my entire life that I would not consider myself an expert. There's plenty of people who know more about that than me. But if you see your kids struggling with something, if it's spending too much time on their phone, if it's picking the wrong friends at school, if it's struggles with their mental health, how are you working to understand what that is? How are you building your intelligence of it? Because if you just rely on what you know from when you were growing up, those times now are completely different. It would be like trying to teach someone or trying to fly a spaceship based on your knowledge of driving a car. Those vehicles just don't operate the same way. So in all the things that you're trying to get understanding. And I think that goes back to involving yourself in conversations. Find out what they're interested in. Find a crack. No matter how hard, no matter how distant, no matter how reluctant, and this probably is speaking more towards the teenage side of parenting, no matter how much your kids you feel like they're trying to push you away and do their own thing, which I will also say this, parents, that's a good thing. Sometimes kids need to learn how to be independent and do some things, but that doesn't relinquish your responsibility from guiding and protecting. It's not, okay, yeah, I'm just going to trust what I've done so far. What I taught them when they were 7, I'm going to hope that works when they're 15. No. Your responsibility stops. It just means that maybe you got to try some different methods. You got to try some different things. No matter how reluctant or resistant they may be, there's a crack somewhere that you can find. How persistent are you going to be? How persistent are you going to be with seeing what they're, and so sometimes questions that we ask can come across as we're trying to catch them in something, right? Who are you talking to? Right? Where were you after school. So guard yourself against that. Try to make your questions come across as genuinely interested. Hey, what are you drawing? That looks really cool. I'm a terrible artist. Maybe you can teach me something, right? Just like that. Try to find a crack, and you're probably going to get rejected, right? You're probably going to get, whatever. Got their headphones in. They don't want to speak to you right now. Are you going to quit just because you got rejected one time? Or are you going to continue to be intentional? Let me say this. They're worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
How many other things in life did you just do one time and think, oh, that's too hard. I'm going to quit. And how much more do you love your kids than those things that you put effort into time and time? They are worth it. And listen, this was a conviction, completely different situation, but I think that it fits to this. I was laying in bed one night. I was, 15, 16, had a person that I was really close to that was away from God at the time. And they really didn't have a ton of interactions with people within a church setting, very, very surface level, right? And so I would text them on Saturday evenings and ask them if they were coming to church, and I would talk to them, and they would help me with schoolwork. And there was some genuine rapport there. And I was laying there in bed one night, and I was worried about them, and I was praying about them, and I was questioning what impact that I had. This person was older than me by several years. What in the world is a 15-year-old? How am I going to have an impact in trying to help them see their place, refine their place? And it was like from out of nowhere. And my Uncle Mike, who's an associate pastor at our church, always said that that's how he feels like God. He knows when God's speaking to him is because it just comes out of nowhere and smacks him in the head. I was laying there in bed and I was thinking about all these things, down on myself, really wasn't super confident that what I was doing was making a difference. And it was like, boom, from out of nowhere. If you don't, who will?
That's right.
Because you may not be able to have the greatest impact that someone else could have, but you're the only one that has any impact right now. So parent, at this point, maybe you've had a ton of issues. Maybe you have tried and you've tried and you've tried, and you say, Christian, I've tried. It's not working.
Yeah.
I would urge you. I would beseech you. Let's use some Bible terms.
Yes,
I would beseech you.
I love that. Yes.
Try again. Try again. Don't give up. Don't give up. Because if you don't, I tell you who else will. Their friends at school.
Yeah, that's right.
I tell you who else will. It's the radio and the movie. And listen, the devil is using every single outlet that he can use to have an impact on your kid. Every single one. They're unlimited at his disposal. Every YouTuber they watch, every TikToker that they watch, every show that they watch, every music person they watch or listen to, that's who's going. So if you don't, it's not really this ambiguous question of, well, who's going to? I tell you who's going to. If you don't, it's going to be this singer, or it's going to be this movie star, or if it's going to be this friend at school, who has their own struggles. That's who's going to do it. So when you put yourself as to who can be a better, weigh the scales, right? I'm going to try to get in here with my cameras. Weigh the scales. Who is going to be able, maybe not to have the most impact, but the best impact?
That's right.
You may be struggling with it. Don't quit. Roll your sleeves up. Get gritty with it. Find a crack. Find something they're interested in and inject yourself into their life. And wherever you can find that's positive, that's uplifting, that's encouraging, because I promise you they will feed to that. They will feed to that. That's the kind of attention that will fill them more than this negative attention that they'll get from other avenues in their life.
That's good. So what would you say, and I know we're quickly running out of time, but what would you say to, I guess this is specifically probably to more like parents of teenagers, what would you say to them about discipline? Because we talked about discipline that's not harsh, that's not punitive. What's a healthy approach to discipline? And let me just say this: I've seen some parents just throw up their hands and give in to, especially being apostolic and being a Christian, and I've seen some parents just say, it's too hard for me to get my child to dress in a godly way, or it's too hard for me to enforce these godly principles in my child. So what's a way parents can set up the boundaries they need and maybe let them feel some natural consequences, but what's a healthy discipline approach?
Yes. So my childhood was probably similar to a lot of people watching this video. My especially my dad, he believed in a whooping.
Yeah, right. Mine too.
I was the oldest, and I was the boy in the family, and so I believed in, and I needed some from time to time. But I will say this: that wasn't the only way that my parents found a discipline. And I think, and I'm not saying anything just about whippings or groundings or here's my East Tennessee slang coming out.
I love
now
it.
that we but I don't think it's as much about the type of discipline, but I do think it's about having a tool belt, right? You go to a work site and there's going to be some things that you're going to have a hammer to drive a nail. But there's going to be some things that you're going to have a screwdriver for, or you're going to have a saw for, or you're going to have something else that you're going to have to do to build this. You're going to have to be able to drill a hole to run electrical. You're going to have a concrete mixer to pour the footers. And if you show up to a job site and you just got one tool, that house is not going to be very strong. You're only going to be able to do so much with one tool. So in terms of discipline, I think there's a couple of things. One, find you a tool belt. And I think that it can come in stages of what's appropriate for the age. It's probably not as appropriate or as effective, maybe, if you're going to try to give a 15-year-old a whipping versus a 5-year-old, right? It's different. And the same token, taking a 3-year-old's tablet for a week probably isn't going to be as effective as, taking a 13-year-old's tablet for a week. So I think you've got to use some godly wisdom as to what's going to be effective, but have a tool belt. Don't just rely on one thing. Don't just rely on what discipline was like for you in your childhood because you turned out okay. Right? I hear that a lot. Well, it worked for me, and so it worked for them. Listen, different times. You can't fly a spaceship based on your skills to driving a car. So have a tool belt of things that you can do. Next, maybe this is the most important. If you only have one method, you got to be consistent. Consistency is the absolute most important thing when it comes to discipline. If you were to ask me consistency or intensity, I would much rather, and I've seen it to be true. I'm telling you, I've seen kids whose behaviors have been atrocious. I've never even witnessed and observed those types of behaviors with parents. It made me uncomfortable when I first saw them. They were so aggressive and just harsh. I've seen kids completely turn around from 3-minute timeout sequences, right? Where there are rules if they get up. There are rules with how long they sit there. There are rules if they can get up if they're still talking, right? They're very consistent. And they were just as effective, if not more effective, than much harsher punishments that parent had tried, because they were just consistent with it. Discipline's kind of like a tug of war. And as a parent, you got to win every time. You got to win. And discipline's not a win or a lose game in terms of that. But I'm using that example as to say, kids are, especially if you've got some, we call them leadership temperaments, but you got some kids that are,
I love that.
They're very type A. They talk back, right? They're if we can hone some of those skills in, they're going to be great CEOs one day because they're very in command, take charge kind of kids. We just got to figure out how to shape that. But they will push you. They will push you and push you and push you. And the biggest thing with being able to be consistent is having a plan. That's when we're teaching parents how to go through this disciplinary process. It's not that it's something just revolutionary. It's consistent, but it's the plan that if my kid does this, here's what I'm going to do.
So it's
And
not
then,
it's not a reactive thing. It's not you just coming up with a punishment on the fly. It's you
right,
already know what you're going to do when this happens.
exactly. I would encourage, if you're a parent watching this right now, and whether you're a single parent, whether you're married and you got your spouse, I would encourage you, sit down one day, look at what are my disciplinary philosophies right now? Write them down. I want you to be able to see what they are. What are the tools that I use? When do I use them? Am I reactive with them? And then if this doesn't look like a very exhaustive list, then make a plan. There are plenty of resources that if you got on Pinterest or Google and you just typed in consistent disciplinary strategies for parents for teenagers or whatever else, you're going to find some resources. Once again, going back to that, and all you're get understanding. You don't have to be an expert, but just inform yourself of parents that are doing this and are finding success. What are they doing, and how can you copy it? Your kid's not their kid, but kids are still kids. Kids are still humans. They can still respond to these things behaviorally. So, one, I think it's about having a tool belt. I think that's going to give you the biggest opportunity to see change, because you're going to need it as kids grow. Two, I think that regardless of how big your tool belt is, consistency is absolutely the key. And how are you going to be consistent? Having a plan so that you're not reactive. Your emotions don't rise up when your kid does something, because I think a lot of anger that comes out in discipline is a secondary emotion to the awkwardness and the uncomfortableness of not knowing what to do. So I'm just going to have to get loud from that. I'm going to have to respond from a very primal part of my brain, because I can't logically think through what I'm going to do next. So I've just got to respond in my animalistic fashion and just yell or spank or do something really quick because I'm uncomfortable, because I don't know what to do. So have a tool belt, be consistent, plan this stuff out. And if you need a second, don't feel like that, and you want it to happen fairly quick, don't feel like you can't take 10 minutes and come up with a punishment or a discipline.
That's good. That's good.
Take some time. It's going to be more effective that way.
Do you think it's okay to, in my mind, I feel like this would be a good modeling tool as a parent with your kids to say, hey, this was not a good thing. I'm frustrated by this situation. I need a few minutes to decide what should happen here, and expressing your emotion as a parent. So it's not coming out in the discipline per se. You're just letting your child know, like your teenager, this is frustrating. Do you think that's okay to portray to your kids, to your teenagers, that what you as a parent are feeling?
Yeah, I don't think it's just okay. I think that is ideal. I think that's a great thing to do. One, I think you model to your kid, hey, I care about you and I don't want to make a rash, quick, impulsive decision.
Yeah.
Two, I think it gives you a chance for some of those emotions to calm down, and it shows them, maybe it's not a disciplinary situation for them, but maybe it's a situation that they don't really know how to respond, to show them, hey, it's okay to take a second. You don't have to decide quick. You don't have to be pressured into something. So I think that is absolutely able to do.
Well, I think it could bring a lot of comfort to your child when they know how you're feeling, because I know my daughter, she just turned 4, but sometimes she'll say, Mom, are you just feeling frustrated right now? And I say, yes, sweetie, I'm feeling frustrated. But I think there's something comforting in a child to know that, hey, I'm not mad at you as a parent. I think that's one of the worst things that kids feel. They feel like their parent is so mad at them and that all these horrible things are going to happen. And it's like you said, anger is a secondary emotion. We've got to identify what really is the root, that we're frustrated, we're disappointed, we're worried, because a lot of times parents are worried and it comes out as anger. And so expressing that to your child, and it's like, more than being upset about this, me and your dad, or I am so worried about this situation. And I think with a child and a teenager, it makes them think beyond just, oh, my parents are mad at me again. What's new? When you express that emotion behind it, then kids understand that, there's more going on than mom and dad just being mad again, and that they're just ridiculous because they're always mad kind of deal going on.
Right. No, for sure. And I think, once again, your discipline is going to be more effective if you can cushion that with building that. Discipline starts way before there's ever an issue, way before there's ever something that you can get in trouble with. Your disciplinary effectiveness starts when you're building these positive relationships with your kid. And you might be watching this, I've got great relationships with my kid. I'm good on that. Fantastic. Why not just try to make it better? Try to find ways that you can make it even better, because even if it's not for you, the efforts that you're trying to make with your kids, another parent might see that while you're at church, another parent might see that while you're out. And we're called to be the light of the world. And I think a lot of times we box that into just Christianity. Why not be a light as a way to be a good parent? Why not be a light as a way to be a good disciplinarian, or, a good encourager to your kids? Be a light in every aspect of your life. If we're going to be here, and I would say that most of us, if not all of us, are going to spend way more time outside of church than inside of church, or in a Christian-like setting. Don't just be a light as a Christian, be a light as a parent.
Yeah, that's good. I think probably the last thing that we'll have time to, hopefully you can answer real quick. This is a question that I hear a lot as a pastor's wife, and of course as a counselor working in ministry. Parents become very concerned when their child becomes spiritually disengaged. And of course, as pastor's wife, we become concerned, youth leaders become concerned. And it seems like there's a real spiritual disengagement there. What would your advice be to us and to parents specifically of not, of course, overreacting to that seemingly spiritual disengagement? What would you say would be some good tools to use to help when you're concerned about a child's spirituality?
Sure. So number one, I heard stories about when my mom and their siblings were growing up and going through high school. Several of them are close together. My aunt tells a story, and I've heard this from several of them. They've walked into their house at times when my mama didn't know that they were going to be there, and they heard her praying for them.
Love that.
She was all by herself.
Yeah.
She was all by herself, right? She was all by herself. There's nobody there. They just I think one time school had let out early for snow. And of course, they don't have the alerts and things they do now. And my aunt happened to walk in and heard my mama praying for them. So number one, you can't underestimate the power of prayer. Now, here's the thing, too. Some things only come about through prayer and fasting.
That's right.
And that's where it's not. I don't think it's super hard for a parent to say, I want to pray for my kids. I think that's a compulsion, because that is more about them. The thought is based on them. The fasting part, that's where it hits home, right? Because then it's sacrifice of me. So why not put a power punch in that prayer and plan some fasts, right? Yeah. Plan some things that you can do, because there's going to be things that they're just outside of your ability to reach. So I think it's important to understand you can only do what you can do, but there's a lot more that God can do.
That's right. I love that.
That's number one. Number two, I think realize, and it's difficult, it's hard, but understand that you're more than likely, depending on the level and the age of what's going on, the level of disengagement, the level of the kid, this is probably not going to be able to be something. It's not going to be a light switch situation where you can just go over, change one thing, and boom, your kid's in the altar every service and they're singing on the praise team and, wanting to be a missionary. This is going to be something that you're going to have to be willing to train for, right? If you're wanting to run a marathon, you can't just go out and run 10 miles day one. You've got to build some stamina up. You've got to do things a little bit every day to try to start building those relationships, to be an example, right? Are they seeing you read your Bible? Are they seeing when they get in your car, when they turn on the radio, what are they hearing? What are they hearing you listen to? What are they seeing you watch? When there's prayer meeting on Tuesday night, are you making an excuse not to go? Or now you might not be able to get them in the car. You can't physically pick them up. I'm not gonna make them feel bad about it. Can't physically pick them up, but are they seeing you go?
Yeah.
What are they seeing from you? Don't underestimate how much of an impact that has. Are they hearing you talk? Yeah. Okay, here's another one. Are they hearing you talk positively about your church? Or are you constantly complaining about, well, they're not taking my ideas, or this should be done this way? Are you, maybe not meaning to, but are you establishing some negative views about other people in your church to them? Or maybe there's something that's with somebody in their youth group and they don't want to be around them. Are you talking to them enough to where they feel comfortable letting you know those things? So I think all that kind of plays in. One,
that's good.
You can't underestimate the power of prayer and amp that prayer up with some planned fasting. Even if it's a day, even if it's just TV or if it's something, give God some of your ammo to use. And then how are you being involved in their life? What are they seeing from you that would make them want to mimic that? And if they do see that, if they see, man, mom gets up before I'm up at school, or dad gets up in the morning and his Bible's out and he's got it open to Proverbs, and I see that that's having an effect because I come home from school and he's concerned about what I'm doing and he's asking about my grades. And
that's right.
Is your personality and is your temperament towards your kids presenting in a way that makes them want to follow after God the way that you want them to follow after God?
That's really good. That is good. That's good because I think sometimes it's easy to want all these things from our kids, but forget that we're the ones. I'm a big thing about modeling, that you model the things that you want to see, not only out of your kids, but out of other people as well. And I think that that's really important. And I think if you want to see spirituality, you have to model it and realize that they may not be as emotional as you are. They may not do it exactly the same way as you, but if you consistently put those things in their lives and you make it important to you, then I think that it will be important to them as well. So that's really good.
I'm sitting here. I wrote this verse down. I think this is fitting. 1 John 3:18 says, "My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth."
Yeah.
Verse 2 of that chapter says this: "Beloved, now are we the sons of God." We're his kids. If this is an example of what parenthood should be, I think that God's a pretty good example. It says, "And it doth not appear what we shall be, but we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him." Why? "For we shall see him as he is." Now that's a lot of shalls, which means absolutes. Now we can try to be like him now because of what we know about the Bible and about the principles that he had when he lived on this earth, but we've not ever seen him. We're going based off of stories and faith. But what this verse says is one day we shall be like him. We're striving to be right now. We're wanting to be. We're really pushing to be. Yes. We shall be. And why? Why is it that? Because we're going to see him. We're going to observe him for the first time. We're going to see his glory and we're going to be able to mimic that. We're going to see his love. We're going to be able to mimic that. We're going to see his power. We're going to be able to mimic that. So parents, what are your kids seeing? One day we're going to see God and we're going to be able to observe that and we're going to learn. We're going to be like him. What are your kids seeing from you? And how does that affect who they are?
That's good. So we want our kids to see the gospel portrayed through us. And that's an everyday thing.
So I heard a quote one time. It said, "Live so loudly that they don't even hear what you say."
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's so good. So good. This is so good. And I think this is encouraging for parents. I really appreciate your time today, because I think this is encouraging for parents, because I think sometimes, especially when you're talking with parents of teenagers, they feel so overwhelmed maybe by what's happening with their teenagers that they feel like there's nothing I can do now. And what you've shared today is some very real tools that they can say, okay, it's not too late. This is not over. This is a learning experience for all of us. That as the parent, I'm going to take the proactive approach, and I'm going to set up some boundaries, some loving boundaries with my kids. And it's not going to happen overnight, but we can turn this thing around for the positive.
Yeah, parents, get you some plans in place. Parent on purpose, be intentional. And listen, you're watching this, and if you're thinking, man, I've really messed up a lot, listen, no, you haven't. I'm sure there's plenty of great things that you've instilled in your kid's life up to this point. Every day, though, try to be a little better. Try to do a little better. Try to learn a little more. Get some more understanding. Hey, we're behind you. All right, you got this. Don't be hard on yourself. It motivate and encourage you to be better tomorrow, and to be better the next day, and to be better the next day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, listeners, for joining in. We really appreciate it. I think this is really helpful to all of us that are parents. And if you're a ministry leader, I think this is very helpful information to you as well. And this has just been absolutely